Our conversation with my friend Danny Parkins is presented by Uber Eats. You know I love them. Get game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. It's time to look at this week's tastiest matchup brought to you by Uber Eats. All right, here we go. Even though I am, on a little bit of a break, about a week break, 10 days, I thought, you know what? I got some time here. Danny Parkins, co-host Breakfast Ball, stops in. We do this about once a month, and we always just kind of spitball a variety of topics. So I'll start with this one. And it's an annual tradition. The All-Star game in the NBA is fairly unwatchable. It has been for most of the last half decade. And people lament what is wrong with the league. I would say two things. First, All-Star games, except maybe baseballs, are all kind of dying. We see all these teams every night, these players. There is no special, a National League guy faces an American League guy, interleague play. The second thing, and I would defend the NBA here, and I've been critical of the league. I think it's become a kind of a monotonous three-point shooting gallery. And that will end somewhere in the playoffs because mid-range games and situational basketball and get a bucket really becomes playoff basketball. It becomes much more half court. It's not on the treadmill. People are defending at a higher level. You just sometimes need a mid-range jumper to win the game. But the NBA, 11 years, $76 billion. Owners are happy, players are happy, commissioners happy. It's not their responsibility if the broadcast partners overreached. So my take is a lot of the complainers don't like the NBA anyway, but the NBA, its owners, players, and employees should be overjoyed right now with a new contract, and the All-Star game is a raindrop in an 11-year rainstorm. It doesn't mean anything.
So the All-Star game is a guilty sports pleasure of mine. Maybe my favorite childhood memory was I went to the All-Star game in Cleveland in 1997 with my dad when the NBA celebrated the 50 greatest players of all time, and unbelievable stories that came out of the weekend. It was so cool for an 11-year-old kid to be able to experience all that in the height of Michael Jordan mania, kid from Chicago. So I love the All-Star game. I love gambling on the dunk contest. I love the dunk contest. I loved Vince Carter. I loved Zach LaVine against Aaron Gordon. Like, I always said it was like my guilty pleasure, the celebrity, the pomp, the circumstance, the ridiculousness of it. And there was a social contract that existed between the players and the fans, those of us that did love it. It was ridiculous. It was silly. There was, Shaq would try to cross someone up and pull up for three. We did not expect high-level basketball for 4 quarters. Go out, do your fun, don't get injured. We got all of it. But there was a social contract that basically then said, keep it close and give us 12 minutes of basketball. Give us 12 minutes at the end. And in 2020, they upheld that social contract. The NBA All-Star game in Chicago, it was right after Kobe Bryant died. Team Giannis against Team LeBron. Half the team was wearing Kobe's jersey number. Half the guys were wearing Gianna's number. And I think because of that, they also did the Elam ending, and maybe some of the history of Chicago mattered. I have no idea. The game was 157-155, and the fourth quarter was entertaining. That's all we want. Like, I don't think I'm asking for a lot that I hear these guys on all of their podcasts, including Draymond's. He will talk about unbelievable pickup run that gets organized in LA in the offseason. I see it on YouTube. Kevin Durant showing up at the Drew League or at Rucker Park and just balling out with non-NBA players and trying and playing hard. So I don't think it is too much to ask. Does it matter? Does it affect the ratings or the drop in the bucket, as you call it? No. But somewhere along the way, the social contract was broken of just try for 12 minutes and manipulate the game to be close and play competitive pickup basketball. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to ask of gazillionaire athletes. I really don't.
Sorry to interrupt this great video, but please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Now back to the video. Some of what the NBA is going through, I always feel like you by the way, you get this in other businesses. If something happens, it happens in threes, and the NBA is going through a run of, ratings news isn't good
Yeah.
and the NBA All-Star game is bad and nobody is watching. And I think they're going through this, and I think a lot of it will be forgotten because I think the Knicks and the Celtics will play an unbelievable Eastern Conference
Right.
Finals and nobody will
Yeah.
care.
The playoffs
And I
should be great.
think Luca and LeBron will connect and the Lakers will get to the Western Conference Finals and nobody will care. How much of this is, listen, it's just the league's always been driven by aesthetics. And right now, the aesthetics aren't good. The game's a little monotonous. The NBA All Star game was ugly and boring. Some of this is just bad PR. It may not have no effect long term, but companies go through this. Nike's gone through it where just like bad comes in three. How much of
I
it's
think
that?
I think a lot of it. But I think that there's like two separate conversations that are happening on parallel tracks that can coexist and feel like they are in conflict with each other, but are not. To your point, this happens to a lot of businesses and a lot of industries. The business of basketball is objectively very healthy. The players have guaranteed contracts. The talent is insane. The contracts are locked in. The Charlotte franchise just went for billions of dollars. Like the league is healthy. That
Yeah.
is the left parallel track. And then the right parallel track is those of us that watch, that love the NBA, can acknowledge regular season doesn't really matter. It's one of 82. Playoffs are a completely different sport. I just did the numbers on the show today on Breakfast Ball. There are five more threes being attempted this year than last year. And it's that's just 1 year. Now we're at 74.7 threes attempted per game on average. And do you know what that has led to? More blowouts, results that have been decided by 20 or more points than any
Yeah.
other time in NBA history before the All-Star break. There have already been 168 NBA games that have been decided by 20 or more points. And that makes sense. You're taking a high variance shot. One team has a good shooting night, one team has a bad shooting night, but three is worth more than two, so everyone is trying to hit threes. You have a hot night, the other team has a bad night, you get a blowout. That's not an entertaining product. So I feel like two things can be
Right.
true. The product is healthy and the product is not at its best. Why are those two things necessarily in conflict with each other?
Yeah. Listen, there there are a lot of things. Steve Kerr pointed this out. It wasn't that long ago when he pointed out that AAU basketball is not helping the
Yeah.
product. It's not. It's tracksuit Tony trying to make a livelihood of it, and the players don't benefit. And the European system is much better. That's part of it. I do think I do think something that does help the NBA in the near future is the NIL will keep a lot of kids in college one more year. A kid can make 4 million bucks at Duke or Carolina. Why go to a crappy team?
Sure.
Live on a college campus. I think that'll help because the one thing the NFL has always realized and leaned into is college football is free marketing. I've said this before, like water's free medicine. College football is free marketing for the NFL. Adam Silver got into office, and there was almost they tried to marginalize college basketball. The players weren't getting paid. College football players don't get paid for 3 or 4 years, and they get tackled. Like it's okay. Like that's I don't pay my interns on my show. That's just part of 16 to 20 years old or 19 years old. So I do think that will help the NBA. I think the NBA, the quality of basketball is good. I think the league is making a lot of money. I think NBC probably out of somewhat desperation overshot the runway a little bit on that contract. I don't know how they make that work, but they're trying to make Peacock grow against Amazon and
Yeah.
Netflix and Disney and all that stuff. So, but that's not an NBA issue. I do think college basketball is an ally. March Madness. I mean, good God, Caitlin Clark comes into the WNBA. Her and Angel Reese are arguably the two most popular players.
Right. I think you and I've talked baseball before on the show, and not to name drop, but Theo Epstein and I had a pretty good working relationship when he was in Chicago running the Cubs. And he's the smartest sports executive I've ever talked to, for sure. But Brad Stevens would be a close second. And Brad Stevens is not going to give up his job right now. But I do think that there would be something that the NBA would benefit from, and Theo and I had this conversation on air and off air. When he ran the Cubs, his job was to exploit the rules in the interest of winning. His job was not to put the most entertaining product on the field. It was to win.
Right.
So strikeouts were okay if you got a lot of walks and home runs. 3 true outcome, and it was objectively not as entertaining of a product. The ball was in play less. There was more time between pitches. The games were interminably long. You would change pitchers every batter. 7, 8, 9 pitchers would get into a game per team. But that was what the numbers said gave them the best chance to win. The same thing has happened in basketball with 3 is worth more than 2. But I bring up the baseball point was because who spearheaded all of the rules changes? Theo Epstein. As soon as he left the Cubs, he's like, well, I care about baseball, so I'm going to close the loopholes that I exploited. 3 batter minimum, pitch clock, bigger bases, things to incentivize the things that he had. And if he gets a job running the Nashville expansion team or a Vegas, whoever, he will then go right back to exploiting the rules to try to win. So someone should get in the league office and try to figure out, because we've talked about it before. I don't know if it's making 3s worth 4 and 2s worth 3. I don't know if it's making dunks worth 3. I don't know if it's expanding the court and making the 3-point line 25 feet, 27 feet. I don't know what the solution is, but as long as 3 is 50% more than 2 and teams are trying to win, as long as those 2 things exist, you're not going to get less 3-pointers in the game unless you change a rule or 2 or 3. So that is just like the fundamental fact of the math of basketball.
That was this week's Tastiest Matchup, brought to you by Uber Eats, as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats has the best, absolute best game day deals all season long. I use it every Sunday. Order now for game day. What's fascinating to me, and I've always really appreciated this, is that it takes baseball and even the NBA a while to make changes. The NFL, which is a runaway leader in all these sports, is tweaking during Super Bowls. I mean, they have such an underdog spirit. I mean, they could so easily be arrogant like baseball and say for 20 years, just we're going to do World Series games at 8:50 p.m. Let's start them then. The Super Bowl is the opposite. They act like they're Division II hockey trying to get eyeballs. They will change rule, and I think they'll change rules. I mean, the Super Bowl with the Eagles and the Patriots, they changed the catch rule in the Super Bowl, suddenly juggled things. It was 6. It was a touchdown. It's like, well, right? No offseason needed. They just changed it. So, and I think in the spirit, I've always defended the NFL. It's a really well-run league. The kickoff was fine. Boring, but fine. Tweaked it. PAT was fine. Boring. Tweaked it. The tush push, I think they will ultimately examine because it's just not good. It's just boring. And again, people get all upset. Why are you punishing us? It's just the way life works. I mean, the bottom line, if somebody takes an advantage and it hurts the quality of entertainment, leagues take it out. But I do think that when it comes to the NFL, we look at it and we go, well, it's popular because it's once a week. No, that helps. I'm not denying that. But they have so pulled away from the other sports. And a lot of it, Danny, I think is they really appreciate we are a television product. Yes. They're really good at that.
And they mess up, and then they undo their mess up. Remember the NFC Championship game with the Saints with the bad pass interference call? They made pass interference reviewable, and I was like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea." And it was a terrible idea. But they walked it back basically immediately. So they changed it too fast, and then they're like, "Oh, we overreacted." And then they changed it right back. And now listen, NFL players don't like their commissioner. They don't trust their owners. They don't have guaranteed contracts. They kind of get ruled under, an iron fist. And so there's a trade-off to we're going to slow play some of these changes. We're going to empower players to have a voice in it and all that. The NFL does not care about any of that. They're like, no, you're doing it our way. These are the rules. And if you want to collectively bargain for less practice in July, go right ahead. We care about the television product. Right. But no, the NFL is king for a ton of reasons, and I'm with you. That is one of them. Again, you and I have talked about this before. You've got an in-season tournament. They are changing the jerseys in the court. Change some rules. Just just
Yeah.
just experiment with it. It's okay. I know they count in the regular season for the standings, but it's okay. It's one of 82. Like, let's just see what it would look like for 5 games per team with no corner three. Let's just see it. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what'll happen. Let's just see it. Let's
Right.
let's floor's always been 96 feet. Let's make it
Well,
106 feet and make the 3-point line 25 feet. Let's just see it for 2 weeks. See what happens.
yeah, I mean, there's one of the things I like about change is you get an answer,
Yes.
right? Like even if it's the wrong answer, General Schwarzkopf, the 4-star, 5-star general talked about that at one point. He said, make decisions just to figure out if it's right or wrong. Like you just inactivity, it's finger pointing, it's guessing. And he was talking about that in regards to military, either exercises or moves. And I feel like sometimes like when baseball, for instance, when Fox sold the regional sports networks, the Murdochs sold it. It's one of the smartest moves in the history of television. It was literally worth half as much the next day and basically worth nothing a month later. So, and they made like 20 billion. But in a weird way, you look at it and think, man, it's really hurt the small market teams, Kansas City and Pittsburgh. What it did, though, it separated small from big teams. And now the Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Houston, the Braves, if you're not good as a big market team, you're just poorly run or poorly
Right.
owned. Is that in a weird way, baseball just had a great 2 years, ratings up, attendance up, and everybody's like, oh, those. And so, like when you make moves and there's mergers and there's sales, there's a winner, there's a loser. But if you're baseball, if I'm Fox, I do not care about
Yeah,
Kansas City.
you and I,
What I
you and
care
I
about
disagree
is
on this
what.
one because I do. Because again, I think that there is a breaking point of greed that you still have to put a good product out there. And like the World Series was great, no doubt. But I think that part of what makes the NFL awesome, maybe the number one thing. The number one thing is probably what you said. 18-game season, every game matters. That's probably the biggest thing. But like a 1B of that is that, what do you think? 28 of 32 teams, when they report for training camp, believe at the very least they can make the playoffs. Like if the right thing bounces their way and they can get
Right,
to
right,
9
right,
and
right,
8 or
right.
10 and 7, like
NFL's the league of
yeah,
hope.
baseball is not. Like baseball has a serious problem, in my opinion, where a third of the league has no chance not only of being competitive, but of even like being relevant when school is out, when kids could go to the game. And then like if you're Pittsburgh, okay, you got Paul Skeens. Your chances of signing him are almost zero. So like I do think that the haves and have-nots of baseball has gotten too out of whack. I know you and I just disagree. Stars, big markets, TV ratings on the biggest games. I get all of that.
Yeah.
And this is a juvenile argument. It's just lame that the Dodgers get everybody. Like it's just lame. Like it's like they get everybody because they happened to sign the last great RSN TV contract before the bubble burst. And like, don't get me wrong, they're run exceptionally well and they're a good organization, maybe the best organization. But it flies in the face of competitive spirit that they just get everybody because they lucked into a television contract based on timing. So you and I will disagree on that baseball point.
Well, and there are moments, like for instance, I think you cannot legislate even. College football playoff proved it. You can invite more teams in. Notre Dame plays Indiana. Game was over in
No
4
doubt.
minutes.
No
Right?
doubt. There's always going to be a have and
Yeah.
have nots, and I'm not naive to that. No doubt.
I mean, women's tennis my entire life. There's been one or two tops globally. Serena, she's just going to win all the big tournaments
Right.
mostly. And I think, if you go look at you could go look at the German soccer leagues. You can go look at the English Premier League, the Italian soccer league, Spanish soccer league. It's always the same two teams. I mean, I think the reality of sports is we spend I read this recently. Somebody said the NBA worries about problems that don't exist. Like they said, let's cut the length of quarters.
That
It's
yeah,
like
that's
nobody's
dumb.
really, nobody cared. It's, I think sometimes in sports, one of the things we really worry about is we're too caught up on parity. There is no parity in the AFC. Josh Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson are going to keep winning their division because they have stable ownership and good enough coaches. And if Joe Burrow didn't have the cheapest owner in sports, he'd be in that group too. So the reality is, I mean, this year I predict almost, and I'll do it again next year. I can predict the AFC for the next 4 or 5 years. It's just easy. NFC is more of a who's hot, who's less injured. Um, but I think in baseball, the bigger danger when you have parity is ESPN's like dropping out of
Right,
baseball. Like, we're not
right.
interested. Apple contract was ridiculous. Roku thing was
A
a
joke.
mess. I mean, just
Yep.
nothing. If the big dogs are crushing, then the big network sign, and then that filters down to some degree to Kansas City or
Yes,
Cleveland.
the problem is, um, unfortunately, we used to call them rich hobbyists. Like the dream is that your team is owned by Steve Cohen, who just doesn't
Right.
care. He's like, I've got more billions than I can count. I do not care if I lose money on this baseball team. This is an ego play. This is a vanity purchase. There are more billionaires than there are baseball teams. I want to own one and I want to win. That's the greatest thing ever for a fan. So revenue sharing exists in baseball, right? The Yankees and the Red Sox and the Mets and the
Yeah.
Dodgers, they share money with the Pirates and the Rays
Yeah.
and the Twins or whatever. And what is very frustrating to owners and business executives of teams like the Yankees and the Cubs is like they don't spend the money. Like you know,
That's
like
right.
the Pirates will just lay in the cut, take their revenue sharing money and profit every year, as opposed to like reinvesting into the business, breaking even,
Yes.
and having your franchise value go up. That's at a minimum what should be required of these billionaire owners. Spend
Right.
the money that is
Yes.
generated by your sport on your
That
product.
Yeah, so that to me, that's the
And
bigger
that's a
issue.
huge
It's
issue.
not,
There are not enough good
yeah,
owners in baseball.
yeah, it's not that the big guys are eating. The big guys eat in college
That's true.
football, the AFC, the big dogs eat everywhere. What you have to do is force like a minimum payroll. Like you very easily, based on TV deals, would know a minimum payroll, and it goes up 6 to 8% a year. That to me is the bigger issue. And I say this all the time to the people critical of the Dodgers. Everybody can do what they're doing with that money. Everybody can push it down the road. I mean, it's not like the Yankees are going to go dry in the next 12
Sure.
years. The Dodgers are saying basically, we'll push it down the road. We'll give you the money. By the way, we'll do all-star teams. We'll win more. It'll help build our brand. We're always going to fill this stadium. So I guess this is my conservative side, my Republican side coming out. Domination is unavoidable. There are just people that are more driven, more willful, more aspirational, hungrier, meaner, whatever it
Yes.
is. Like, you just have to come to terms with it. This is not Evergreen State College, where it's the whimsical, idealistic professors dot the campus. We're dealing with billionaires, and so some of them just have bigger egos and care more, and some of them are like, it's a toy. It's a toy at a convention they can brag. And so I've come to terms with, and maybe it's because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest where I've lost my NBA team. My baseball team's never competitive. And the Huskies are good when they have the perfect coach. I've just come to terms with, you have to be satisfied. If you have good coaching, decent ownership, and you're viable, that may be as good as it's going to be, because a quarter of all these pro leagues have expanded to cities that can't compete. Memphis can't compete with LA, Boston, or New York or Philly. They can't, and everybody in the league knows it. But those owners wanted the expansion fee.
There's definitely some truth to that. And to win in a market like that, it feels like you have to have lightning strike. You have to draft
Yes,
Giannis.
and it's
You
one
have to
year.
draft Giannis at 15. But it's like, oh,
Right.
that's how Milwaukee got their title. You drafted Giannis at
Yeah.
15. Okay. Congratulations. Or Oklahoma City. and have the best executive in the sport who, for some reason, apparently is just not interested in leaving. Like Sam Presti's
Right.
like, no, I'm good. I'll just live and work in Oklahoma City when any team in the league, if he was like, I want to come work for you, would give him $1 gazillion and a penthouse apartment because
Right.
he's clearly the best. And he's like, no, I'm good here. Like Oklahoma City's got a shot as long as they've got that guy. But yes, most teams have a real inequity that they can't overcome.
One of the things I think being an NBA executive, so a lot of my contacts are NFL GMs and scouting
Yeah,
directors. And so I don't think people understand, SGA, nobody predicted this. Sorry, nobody
correct.
did, right? He was a good player, but correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't people think like Kevin Knox was going to be the better
Yeah, SGA was a
NBA?
very polarizing draft prospect. People had some real bad
Right, right.
SGA opinions.
Yeah. But what's amazing about NBA executives is that, college football executive, if you take out like Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, most kids stay in school for 4 years. I get so many pieces of game footage in big
Oh, sure.
games. If you can't, I mean, if you're, take out the COVID quarterback year where it just screwed up everything. I mean, seriously, just take the Trey
Justin
Lance,
Fields,
Justin Fields,
Mac Jones,
kid for the Jets.
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
take that one out. No, we were all guessing. I mean, I remember that year, like Harbaugh basically shut down Michigan football. They were just egregiously
Yep.
bad. Belichick said, screw this. I don't care. Take that out. Um, the hit rate on quarterbacks has gone up noticeably over the last 6 or 7 years. And that's the hardest position for me because so much of it's soul and toughness and leadership and intangible stuff that's hard to
Yep.
quantify. But these NBA execs, I mean, you're going off nothing. I mean, you can't do high school. You get basically, you not only get like 1 year of college often, but the first 12 games are against like directional
Right.
schools. You may in your conference, he may only face one other NBA power forward the whole year. And oh, yeah, he's 19. Some players aren't emotionally equipped at that point. I'm amazed at the hit rate in the NBA draft, which isn't very high. I think it's one of the things that we just don't understand. Like, if you said, what's the hardest thing to do for any executive in any sport? NBA general managers are drafting 18 and 19 year
Yeah.
olds. You ever thought about
Yeah,
that?
it's crazy. I think that what it is that there is something to watching 10 guys on a basketball floor that
Yeah.
isn't that overwhelming. Like you and
Okay.
I can go to a game, a high school game. There can be an NBA prospect at the high school game. And within, what do you think? 90 seconds? We know who it is. I do think that there is something to the
That's fair.
because there are so many people play basketball and so few play in the NBA. And then even the guys that are in the NBA, obviously there are guys that just ride the bench. Like to be a standout basketball player, you have to be so unbelievably good. And I'm in football, it's like, oh, is that receiver the best deep ball receiver? But his offensive line sucked, so his quarterback never had time for the deep ball routes to develop, or did the quarterback not have an arm to get it to him? Like for the receiver to produce on the deep ball, the line has to do its job, the quarterback has to do its job. Like
Right.
a lot of things have to happen. It's very difficult to isolate and evaluate the individual performance within the concept of a team game. In basketball, it's not that difficult to be like, oh, that's the best athlete, that's the best shooter. And, and,
Well,
and then obviously you start separating degrees. But I think that
well,
that is a part of basketball that is just inherently easier to scout.
yeah, it's like one of these music shows. I'm not a music exec, but I can tell like 3 notes in with Carrie Underwood. You're like, oh yeah, you could. That's on a
Hey,
label that you
right.
sell that.
There's so I think so. I think that there is, and by the way, also, what, 2 rounds of an NBA draft, 30 teams, 60 picks, and like 15 per draft really do make it. Like the NBA draft is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like it's like we're drafting an international guy. It's a draft and stash for contract rights in 2032. Like it's like what is happening? Like it's like there are not enough good players because it is so hard to be as good as these NBA guys that you do really get to the point where you're drafting the spec, which is why, by the way, though, that a guy like Presti is truly amazing. Like to be able to differentiate at that level and have hit after hit after hit after hit after
Yes.
hit, even if they were top 5 picks, he still picked he still drafted James Harden. Like a lot of teams didn't. Like he still drafted Russell Westbrook. Teams didn't. He still took SGA. Teams didn't. Like there's a team out there that took Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so even at the very top of the draft, teams do still mess up. So they deserve credit when they consistently get it right.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that is the thing about basketball is that there's an inherent, he's faster than everybody. He jumps higher than everybody. Like I think that that's a big part of it.
Well, yeah. I saw Zach LaVine when he was at Ballard High School in
I
Washington
bet
State.
he was really good.
Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are. All the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Slams, dishing the ball, cleaning the glass, get behind your favorite players. Prop bets you can make on DraftKings. It's fun. The home of NBA player props. If you're ready to place your first bet, make it really simple. Pick how many points your favorite player is going to score. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook. They have an app. Download it. Make your pick. If you're a first-timer, here's something special. New DraftKings customers, all you have to do is bet $5 to get 150 in bonus bets instantly. So take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download their app. Takes 90 seconds. Use the code Colin, COLIN, to get 150 bones in bonus bets. Betting just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Yeah, so I saw like his sophomore or junior tape. Somebody said there's this kid in Ballard. You know, I'm from the state of Washington. Yeah. So I went on like YouTube or something, and I'm like, holy shit. This guy can hit threes. I mean, just insane hops. Just didn't even make, like 38-inch vertical as 16, 17-year-old. What I think the harder part, and you really never know this. I mean, you wouldn't know this unless you roomed with somebody in college. You don't know the personality. I don't think Zach LaVine necessarily wins games. I think in a possession-by-possession, late-in-game sequence, he does things that drive me nuts. But he's also productive. I think that's something that not even Sam Presti knows is, does that talent manifest itself into being a great teammate, working hard, being great in circumstantial basketball? Like that's where SGA is just a bucket. Like it's just whatever it is, his temperature lowers, like his heartbeat lowers. He's better. Whereas there are guys out there, Westbrook's a classic example. You have to draft him. He's just too talented. I'm not sure he's a winning player, but he is an audaciously gifted player. Some of that I think comes down to luck.
I agree.
Like there's certain, like it was obvious. Like Kobe Bryant apparently had the best workout Jerry West had ever seen. Jason Tatum was another kid that very early on, he was way more mature than kids his age. Everybody was like, he just felt like a 32-year-old man when he was like 19 at Duke. But I do think there's a lot of these kids that Jalen Green, I watched him when he came in to Houston the first year. I'm like, yeah, he's talented, but he doesn't even understand how to play basketball. And then the second year, you're like, oh, okay. That part, I think it takes great coaching, good GMing. That's where a good organization can help.
No doubt. And so I'll just use a Chicago example. So DeMar DeRozan is, a chip off the Kobe Bryant block, these legendary workouts, this great leader, took guys under his wing, all that stuff. The Bulls drafted this kid, Patrick Williams, out of Florida State with the 4th overall pick. Crazy, talented, athletic, 3-and-D style wing, has all the God-given ability in the world. And there was these big stories of man, this guy just floats and he's kind of aloof and he doesn't assert himself. So DeMar was like, I'm going to take him under my wing. I'm bringing him out to California for an offseason. He's doing my 3 workouts a day. He's going through DeMar boot camp and he's going to come back a changed guy. And apparently he went, he did the workouts and he came back and he was the same guy. He's just He's not an assertive guy, but he's so talented.
Yeah.
He signed a $90 million contract. Patrick Williams will probably make $200 million playing basketball and never really make an impact or be dominant in any way. Failure? I don't know. He'll make $200 million, but he doesn't have it. He doesn't have that dog thing. Zach
Yeah.
LaVine, unbelievably efficient offensive basketball player. He was an 18-year-old kid in Minnesota with nobody to like teach him how to be a pro. And then he went to Chicago where there was
Yeah.
no one to really teach him how to be a pro. And he was like, I don't know, I'm making hundreds of millions of dollars. I signed the Supermax. I've won the dunk contest. I've been in the three-point contest. I've got a $30 million house in LA. Like, life's pretty good if you're Zach LaVine. Like, how much does he really need to
Right.
change because he's not Kobe Bryant? I think that there is just something
Right.
to these guys have. There's a little. They're all crazy talented. They all make an insane amount of money. And then there's just that like psychotic gene that they don't all possess. And some organizations can scout it and some organizations can cultivate it, but most can't. And so that's the difference between the best and the other ones.
So about and Danny wants to talk about this, so I want to bring it up. So about a month ago, I read the New Yorker, and about one out of every three or four articles just sticks with me. Yes, it's very left leaning, blah blah blah, whatever. It's just some of the best magazine writing ever. And so they had a Lorne Michaels article about it was last month or the month before. It was
It was
fascinating.
great.
So as a kid who grew up on Saturday Night Live, it was just I engulf myself in it. It takes about an hour to get through, but it is just a great read with a glass of bourbon next to a fireplace, and your mind is taking you to John Belushi and the Eddie Murphys and Dan Aykroyd's Chevy Chase. So they did their 50th. And again, I did not see it. I'll probably do some YouTubing. Again, on the internet, Tom Hanks got kind of, hammered because apparently he did some MAGA thing. I don't know. What was your interpretation of it?
So I loved it. And I was never, so I'm kind of obsessed with comedy. And I was actually never like lock in and watch SNL every week guy.
Same, same.
Um, but I got a few thoughts on this. Anyone who is complaining about that show or criticizing that show, it strikes me as like so clueless and devoid of understanding of the entertainment business on any molecular level that you should have your rights to criticize and have opinions on things stripped from you. It was a remarkable accomplishment. Just the sheer amount of talent in the room trying stuff. People are like, oh, that wasn't a funny sketch. It's sketch comedy. It's live sketch
Right,
comedy. Like bands get to rehearse songs and then perform them. Stand-up comedians get to rehearse material and then perform it. This is you get one shot to do it live. So they're not all going to be home runs. They're not all
that's
going to
right.
be the iconic bits. So anybody who ever is like, that was a bad episode or that was a bad sketch, you are inherently missing the point. Like it's not
Right,
about 100% success rate. It's about shot attempts. It's about, Lauren Michaels
right.
is like, the show's never ready. It's 11:30. Like that's the ethos of the show.
Yep.
So I think that like any criticism of it just strikes me as like not understanding what they are attempting to do. And then the cultivation, like we just talked about Sam Presti. Like what is even close in terms of an incubator of talent for second place to SNL? Maybe The Daily Show? Like their run is pretty remarkable of people that came through
Right.
under Jon Stewart. It's pretty incredible. But like the number of people over 50 years that became mega
Superstars.
megastars is Lauren Michaels is like the greatest general manager in the history of general managers. I can't even think of
Yeah.
anyone that is even close to him. And that should just carry such reverence. And I know people say Will Ferrell would have been Will Ferrell even without SNL. Fine. Maybe the talent was there. But like, would the Blues Brothers have happened? I don't know. They did a sketch. Belushi and Aykroyd got together.
Hey, listen,
Like,
listen. Chris Rock couldn't get on the air for like 3 years until he created, I think, Nat X.
right. Like
Like
Larry David,
many of the
Larry
stars.
David
Yeah.
famously was a writer, couldn't get bits on, quit, then goes home, talks to his neighbor Kramer. He's like, just pretend like it never happened. Go in on Monday. He goes in on Monday, pretends like it never happens, gets his job back, still doesn't really get anything on the air, leaves the show and creates Seinfeld and writes that bit into
Right.
Seinfeld. Like it is, they have misses. They didn't cast Jim Carrey. You know what I mean? Like they have
Yeah.
misses, but the sheer volume is incredible. And I just when you watch the Adam Sandler song,
I did.
it was so good. It was so
Yeah.
beautiful. And there is something to, and this isn't kissing your ass or whatever, I guess it is, but like you're kind of like this. Like you are at the top of the mountain, you have success, companies, radio, TV, money, fame, and all of it. You could just retire to an island and stop, but you still do 200 something shows a year and are creative and churning out a bunch of stuff. Adam Sandler is worth a gazillion dollars.
Yeah.
He's worth a
Yeah.
gazillion dollars. And so people are like, oh, he makes dumb movies. He also makes, like, there's probably no one comedically in my life more influential than Adam Sandler. His comedy albums were
Right.
unbelievable. And then his first four comedies are Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, Big Daddy, and I'm blanking on another absolute mega one. Whatever it was.
The
Um,
the Bob Barker
yeah,
golf
Happy
one.
Gilmore. If I didn't say Happy Gilmore. Yeah, Happy Gilmore. Like, it's an unbelievable thing. And I went and saw him do a stand-up show 18 months ago. And he sold out the
Yeah.
United Center. 15 new songs. They weren't all hits, but like Adam Sandler, that means that guy is grinding and writing
Yeah.
15 new songs. He doesn't need to be doing that. And are they all
Yeah.
hits? No. But his Chris Farley song is one of the most beautiful comedic things I've seen in the last 10 years. His phone wallet keys song, you think about it every time you look for your phone wallet and keys. Like that song at SNL 50 is going to resonate. His song that he did for his monologue after getting fired was iconic and it's like a gazillion views on YouTube. Like these guys and women, obviously, are so 1% of 1% talented and still driven that
You
that
know,
any criticism, and I know I'm rambling, but it really bothers me instead of
well,
just appreciating and marveling at the greatness of it.
and now for our segment Hot Off the Press, presented by our friends at Louisiana Hot Sauce. Bring the food at your party to a whole new level with the original Louisiana brand hot sauce. I put it on a pizza last night. It was great. Bold, authentic flavor, embodies the rich culinary tradition of Louisiana. The original Louisiana brand hot sauce, perfect for those who demand great flavor with just the right amount of heat. I use it on my eggs. I put it on my sandwiches. I put it on my pizzas. I love it. Well, remember, comedy critics like you appreciate the swings and even the
Yes.
misses. The people criticizing Saturday Night Live it's a lot of the don't get it crowd, or they feel they're being marginalized. Well, and then they have a right to an opinion. But I always think it's the silliest thing when, in our business, the media critics, I just don't have a lot of time or patience for listening to a football broadcast and not liking what an announcer says in the third quarter on a fumble. Do you understand how hard it is to say 300 things each 12 seconds and they all be brilliant. If you can hit 80%, you're
Right.
just, Troy Aikman hits on 70, 80%. That is as good as you can do. And he's been doing it for 20 years. He's great
Yeah.
at it. And so and I think one of the things about art, people forget this about Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando he had like 7 legendary movies. He had all sorts of
Sure.
bombs. That's the spirit of being an artist. I think most comedians think Norm Macdonald is one of the
Oh yeah.
truest, most authentic stand-up acts of our lifetime. I mean, revered when he passed away. Like it really, and I think Gary Shandling had that
Yep.
as well. Shandling, if you go look at Shandling's diary, he had so much self-doubt. Sometimes maybe it was self-loathing, whatever it is, in therapy forever. And I think the great comedians, I mean, Will Ferrell, I've watched 5 or 6 of his movies. I think he's probably the most dynamic, even more so than Belushi. I think he's the most dynamic comedic presence on Saturday Night Live. And I think even his stuff, like people don't give the hot tub when he's a college professor. It's one of the grossest, cringiest things. And my wife and I used to talk in that language for about 2 years. We could not stop laughing. It was so gross and cringy. That doesn't even get talked about. It's Jeopardy. It's the
Yeah.
cheerleader. So, and I think one of the things what you appreciate about it is I think what most writers who cover comedy, John Mulaney performed at the United Center. I read the next day the newspaper article. Little too critical for my taste, but he took you through a journey of what it all meant and the rehab stories. I think comedy critics mostly land on your side, which you owe it to the industry to take just audacious swings. And I mean, Norm Macdonald bombed regularly at the Laugh Factory in La
And
Jolla.
he
It just
loved it.
all
And
the
he loved
time.
it. And
Loved
that
it.
and that's the act of it. And these people don't need to be doing it. And but it's just in their blood. It's just like who they are. They love it so much.
Remember when ESPN came out with ESPN the
Oh yeah.
phone, George Bodenheimer, and it lost 50 million. And I defended George and I said, time out. If it would have hit, it would have been $100 billion hit. It was a $50 million loss.
Yeah, he took us away. Big
That is
idea.
that's a rounding error. At that time, ESPN was making 8.5 billion annually. When you're an industry leader, when you're Will Ferrell or Jim Carrey in his prime, you owe it almost not just to yourself, to the industry to take big effing
Amen.
swings.
Amen. And so I'm not saying that there should be no consequences or that I don't have my
Right.
preferences or that bits don't miss or whatever. Like and like you said, everyone has a right to an opinion. But I just don't know how you could watch a 3-hour show that opens with Sabrina Carpenter and Paul Simon, like bridging that level of time, and then goes into Steve Martin and John Mulaney doing a co-monologue, then having Bill Murray sit at the Weekend Update desk and have Jerry Seinfeld and Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the crowd with Larry David, and then watching Eddie Murphy do Tracy Morgan next to Tracy Morgan. It is so goddamn funny. And then just be like sitting there on your couch being like, not good enough. It's just insane. It's an insane opinion to have. And I just they should be revered. It should be revered. And I know it is. So this isn't like some sort of like wild stance that I'm taking. But there's just nothing else like it. And the sheer volume of swings, it almost doesn't matter how many hits or misses they have. It's just the sheer volume
Yeah.
of swings.
Yeah, I think artists are different than us. I think they have different brain types than accountants. I don't want my accountant taking LSD.
Right.
I understand that may be ayahuasca is absolutely part of Judd Apatow's voyage.
Oh, no.
Absolutely.
Neil
I mean,
Brennan, co-creator of Chappelle's Show, absolutely. I mean, he talks about ayahuasca all the time. Three mics, unbelievably brilliant special. Blocks, incredible follow-up special. Like, yeah, I'm glad that that guy does hallucinogenic drugs. I'm really glad. Like, it's led to
yeah,
some pretty incredible comedic discoveries and breakthroughs. Uh,
yeah. What I think I almost I wish people could appreciate people. This idea of perfection. I was doing a podcast the other day for a friend, and he asked me about my show, and I said, I said my goal isn't perfection; it's perspective. I'm not looking to be perfect. I'm taking swings. I think I just owe it to the audience to be entertaining and have, Aaron Rodgers is going to the Rams and Stafford's going to the Giants, and I think this is better than a 50-50 shot. If you and I talked about that at the bar, people would lean in. Like, really? Ooh, that's fascinating. That's interesting. And so I think, and maybe this has happened my entire life, or maybe I just hope that artists aren't dissuaded from doing great work because the criticism now is so urgent, it's so vile, and it's so accessible. And it's like, folks, you don't understand. Like, I went and watched John Mulaney in Chicago, Sebastian Maniscalco. Those nights are one-offs. I mean, my wife bought me seats to John Mulaney. I will remember that until I
no doubt.
die. It was that good of a show, and don't dissuade artists from taking swings. I think this goes back to the very point is you know I wish Jim Carrey would do more. I wish he wasn't so reclusive. I wish he would do
No,
more.
no, of course. I mean, in 1994, Jim Carrey gave us Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, and The Mask. In 1 year, it's the most incredible comedic year ever. And and then he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna do the Truman Show. I'm gonna do Man on the Moon. And by the way, both awesome. Man on the Moon.
Yeah,
If you haven't seen the documentary, Jim and Andy or whatever the documentary is called about how Jim Carrey like immersed himself in becoming Andy Kaufman, that is 90
yeah,
minutes well spent. Like talk about
yeah.
creative genius and artist. But yeah, these guys, and by the way, like we were talking about the ratings of the NBA. The ratings of SNL are still remarkable. Like it for Saturday night, like that thing, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe they're out. I probably could have figured it out. My guess is that will be the most watched thing on American television in 2025 that isn't football. Like some football will beat it, but I my guess is that SNL 50 will outrate any World Series game, any political speech, any NBA Finals game. College football national championship will beat it. Obviously, a bunch of NFL will beat it. But my guess is that rating will be the biggest non-football event of the year. And for them to still have that kind
And
of
that,
cultural influence 50 years in is just insane. Just insane.
yeah. The I thought, I know we've talked about this before, but speaking of artist, I think if you took any NFL quarterback and said he was more artist, it would be Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Aaron's a very unique, and I tend to believe that people make mistakes, but most NFL reporters are very, very good. So I'm gonna trust the NFL reporter who broke this story that basically Aaron begged the Jets to keep him, and it's interesting because I think we both acknowledge Aaron's smart. He's a bright guy, better than average intelligence. But he's had two franchises catch him off guard, letting him go. And it's an interesting thing with Aaron. Generally, these two things coincide: intelligence and self awareness. And we think Aaron's smart. And twice he's knocked on the door of the franchise and they're like, they do the Vegas dealer. Yeah, we're out. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What I find interesting about Aaron, if this story is true that he begged to stay, is that he doesn't get his brand. And it's like, Aaron, you're not some dullard. You're not a dim bulb. You're a lot of
Right.
work and you're not nearly as good as you used to be. This, whether you're a talk show host or a quarterback, never ends well. When I read that he was begging to stay or he really wanted to stay, part of it to me was sad. It's like, Aaron, how do you not get this? Does that
So so so
land any way
so
for you?
I don't. So Albert Breer then reported that Aaron wanted to stay, wanted it indicated that he wants to keep playing, but that he was not. He did not present it like that he was begging. Rodgers doesn't strike me as a guy that would get down on one knee and beg the New York Jets for
Right,
employment. So I didn't
right.
buy the behind the paywall New York Post story that said it was like a man walking himself to the gallows and referencing ayahuasca. It was like very New York Posty. And so I was like, I took it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Um, what I do think is true is that Rodgers probably went to that meeting and stated his case. I was hurt at the beginning of the year. I played much better at the end of the year. And what's your plan? If not me, then who? And they probably don't have a great answer for that right now. So I bet he stated his case. I still struggle to find a team that makes more sense for Rodgers than Pittsburgh. People keep saying Minnesota. Aren't they going to try JJ McCarthy? They traded
Yeah,
up
they
in the
are.
first round to draft him. And if they think that if they got a great season and seasons out of Kirk Cousins, and then a great season out of Sam Darnold, I would have to imagine that they think that the guy that they picked, they can get a great season out of for very
Well,
cheap.
and now for our next segment, Whiskey Business, brought to you by Green River Whiskey, the official whiskey of the Colin Cowherd podcast. If you want to enjoy life's simple pleasures, reach for Green River Whiskey. Whether it's rye whiskey, single barrel bourbon, you're getting over a century of craftsmanship packed into every bottle. Hop on over to greenriverwhiskey.com and discover a legend in a bottle today. Well, I want to quickly segue to this. I don't want to spend too much time on Aaron. So there was a story that Jason McIntyre deserves credit. He talked about it like 4 days before anybody else did, Stafford to the Giants. And I made 2 calls on it, and it was a real thing. It's now Stafford may just want a new deal and an influx of money from the Rams. That's probably
Sure.
it. The idea of going from Stan Kroenke and Sean McVay and indoor football to the Giants, facing Philadelphia twice a year, and Jaden Daniels does not feel appealing to me. Just chaos to non-chaos. The Rams are a really well-run
Right.
ship. Um, but it was interesting. So when I proposed that, it was amazing. And again, it's fans. So how many people said, you cannot give up a first-round pick for Matt Stafford? And I'm like,
You
time
definitely
out.
can.
It is a weak draft. You've been unwatchable for a decade. Like, you're the GM of the Giants. I press you into a corner. What would you give up for Matt Stafford in a weak draft?
Yeah, I mean, I would try to make it next year's first round pick. Right? Like not don't
You got to give up some. I'm not going to let you get away with that. You got to give me something this year.
yeah. Then I mean, listen, I still think Stafford's an arguably top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think there's a big like
So
I
do
think there's a
I.
big 4, and then like Matt Stafford. Everyone was immediately like Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the NFC, and I was like, I don't know. I think I'll still take the 35-year-old gunslinger, like personal to win a
Yeah.
game tomorrow. I'll I'll
Yeah.
still take Stafford over Jaden Daniels, though Jaden's amazing. So yeah, I think that if the Rams were open for business, they would get a first round pick for Matt Stafford. Even at his age, I do.
Yes.
Now,
Even though you'd have to redo the
yeah.
deal. Like, he's just too damn good in a league now that is all
Yeah,
about
and
the
it's the type of thing
quarterback.
that you don't go into it blind. Like his agent would be given permission to talk to the team. Hey, are you playing? You're not retiring next year, right? No, you're playing multiple years. Okay, cool. Yeah, and as long as they have a guarantee that Matt Stafford would sign a contract extension, rework the deal to your point, and play multiple years, I do think that he would get a first round pick. He's awesome. He's awesome. I
Yeah.
I don't really get why the Rams would want to be out of the Matt Stafford business though. Like I watched your segment and like
Okay.
I
So
personally would put up
the
with his wife saying goofy things and like he's Matt Stafford.
well, I think what the Rams are looking at, some of that public Cooper Cup, Stafford, the Rams felt a bit bullied in social media. The wife, Cooper Cup. It's like, guys, we're really good. We're really good owners. We're good people here. Don't go public. So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing you have to look at is take Stafford out. Who are the pocket quarterbacks that you really think can win a Super Bowl over the next 10 years? Goff, and that's mostly because of the O line, really, of Detroit. The O line is so suffocating, it could move the ball against Philadelphia's D
Yep.
line. The truth is, I think, and they're also looking at Matt wants 4 years, they give him two. So I think they want Matt Stafford, but I do think rent a quarterback for a year because next year's quarterback class is much better. Is Aaron Rodgers? I think Aaron, if you go to Aaron's last 10 games in New York, with at that point, arguably the worst coaching staff, not in Chicago in the league. It was the worst coaching staff. And he put up like really decent numbers the last 10 games. My take is with McVay, if you could hold those numbers for a year, 2 year deal, we draft a quarterback. And I also think Aaron has been humbled. I think he'd come, live in Malibu and be like, this is a
Oh,
gift.
listen,
I'm taking
I
this
have
gift.
no issue with understanding why Aaron Rodgers would want to play in LA for Sean McVay. That's not a
Yeah.
that's not a leap. My thing is if I'm Sean McVay, I think Matt Stafford is better than Aaron Rodgers at
Yes,
this
he is.
stage. Like
He
I
is.
just don't get why the
Yeah.
Rams would want to be out of the Stafford business to get into the Rodgers business. Like if Matt Stafford forced a trade or retired or whatever, then like okay, we can have that conversation. But I just I get to me all these teams that people are throwing out for Rodgers, like the Niners, the Vikings, the Rams, it's like yeah, that all sounds great for Aaron. I think it's much more likely that it's going to be like Vegas, Tennessee,
Yeah,
nobody.
Vegas.
Like I think
Right.
that's where it's going to be like, is he going to just play to play and grind out 6 wins, or I don't believe that a Super Bowl contender is calling Aaron Rodgers. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I don't believe that a Super Bowl contender is ready for him.
So I'm going to throw something out at you. And this, I haven't fully baked this
No, this is
idea,
the
but
best.
it's just
Let's do it.
interesting. So, so I was with my wife for 4 days in an undisclosed location, and we were just talking about a bunch of stuff. And I said, this was my theory. I said, Americans don't like change. 40% of Americans never leave their zip
Right.
code, and they don't like sudden change. I said, so what Trump and Musk are doing, it may play well to the wealthy, to the status of the top of the Republican Party. But for most Americans, they don't like change. It's just too much, too soon, too fast. We don't like change. I've moved all over the country. I'm comfortable. I think I'm an outlier. Nobody else in my family likes it. Nobody in my sister's family likes it, or my wife's family likes it. People don't like change. So we're going through a lot of change. And I think eventually you do too much of it and people, it's a turnoff. But I said, I've been watching now for several months since the inauguration and since the win by Trump. And I said, you would think the Democrats lost by 12 million
Oh yeah.
votes and didn't get a state. And I'll throw a theory at you. I told my wife driving back, I said, on average, usually the Democrats have more women than Republicans, generally, more African Americans, more kids who are bullied, more gay, lesbian, more people that have needed assistance. And I said, those people, when they lose, are more prone to believe the sky is falling. I said, when conservatives lose, they're like, all right, we just need a better candidate. Let's face it, most of us grew up, conservatives were, everybody's rich dad was a
Yep.
conservative, right? That's kind of the way it worked. And so I said, if you listen over the last 2 months to Democrats, you would think, forget the Electoral College, you would have thought it was Walter
Right.
Mondale. You would think that literally it was a 13 million vote difference. And I said, because I think Democrats, if you look at the base of the Democratic Party, it is often people who have had real struggles. Not that Republicans haven't, but there are women have not been in as much power as men have. Minorities have not been in
Sure.
power, and that Democrats are overthinking it. If they got a really dynamic, vibrant candidate in 2 years, it would change everything, and you'd be like, "We are number one. This is the party of genius." And that people, when they lose an election, Democrats, when they lose the election, are just inherently more negative and neurotic about it than conservatives.
I think that tracks. I know a lot of Democrats who are pretty neurotic. Yeah, you're talking to one of them. Yeah, I think that tracks completely across the board. And listen, I don't know. I spend an above average amount of time online. I assume this is your soft launch for your candidacy because isn't that America just needs to know you? You just need to be like a rich radical centrist that gives hot sports takes, and then all of a sudden you're in, right? Let's go. Forget Stephen A. Smith. Colin Cowherd, 28.
No,
Bring analogies to the White House.
no, I have no interest in it. But one of the reasons I love this podcast is I just throw these half-baked ideas out. And I told my wife, I said, Jesus, eventually all these changes are going to scare some people off. And they're going to go back to moderates or left. This is too much activity for most Americans. They don't like it. A lot of Americans who are being displaced may be conservatives. They're not all liberals at
Yeah,
USA.
the story of like, I voted for Trump and now I lost my job. Like, yeah, no shit. Like, do people like that? I'm not saying like you deserve it. That's not my point at all. My point was like, he doesn't
Right.
strike me as someone that's like doing this with like a fine tooth comb. That is like, like the point is chaos and disruption and throwing so much stuff against the wall that it's like a moving target. And what am I supposed to focus on? And that's the point of it. He's not really making a bunch of discernments of like this person and this government agency happened to vote for me. Like there was just a story I was just reading that was like they had to undo some firings because it was a bunch of people who worked at like a nuclear test site. They're like, we can't fire the safety guy at the nuclear test. Good. I'm glad that you caught that one. So yeah, I'm not interested in this next wave of stories of like I voted for Donald Trump and then I lost my job. Like he doesn't give a shit. He won.
Right.
He
Yeah.
won.
Yeah. So just my
I
whole
like your
theory
theory.
is basically Democrats, yeah, they struggle. They tend to be introspective. They tend to be a little more insecure. A lot of their life backgrounds, they weren't in control. So when you lose more control, it is really off-putting and it throws you into this dark hole of
Yeah,
despair.
and listen, I mean it's like talking politics is whatever, but I'll do it with you. You brought it up. Democrats try to be all things to all people. Got a very wide net. You know what I mean? Like you,
Yeah.
LGBT, minorities, women's rights, all incredibly valuable, worthwhile causes. It's a little bit more complicated when there's two teams and you're trying to be like the all things to all people, and the other side's just
Right.
like, I don't know, let's just bulldoze the whole thing. Like, that's like an overly simplistic, reductive way of looking at it. But like, yeah, they could probably just be like, we just need a better candidate. And Democrats are like, who did we offend? And who's the Joe
Right.
Rogan of the left? And like, should we have
They're
done
out.
Call Her Daddy? It's like, shut up. Just get a better
Right.
candidate. Just get a better candidate and win.
That's exactly my point. We come all the way around and
Yeah.
that's it. Just get a better candidate and you'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And in
All right.
2 years, they'll probably run Hillary.
Oh,
I'm
Jesus. Oh.
just kidding.
I made the argument there are two types of artists. Gordon Ramsay, Jay-Z, LeBron, where there's artistic interpretation or artistic talent, but they're very good businessmen. They can compartmentalize. And then there's the artist on the other side who is just all artist and cancels the tour and sues Ticketmaster and is, it can struggle with bandmates. And then there's, you know, the other side. There's two types of artists, and that LeBron is very much in the Gordon Ramsay, Jay-Z, Bono, Mick Jagger. I'm not a businessman, I'm a
Yeah.
businessman. Kevin Durant is sort of the wandering artist, independent to a fault. It's not about championships, it's about being the best you. And I don't, and in a way, I think he somewhat tanked his career because at 30, there was an argument he was better than LeBron, and now he's viewed as somebody who just can make baskets, and that's about it. Um, where do you, how do you, because I really love watching KD and I think he's such a unique all-time player. I've argued if you did a one-on-one tournament in league history, I'd take him over Michael. I think he's unstoppable at 6'11", just literally
Yep.
unstoppable. Michael would miss just, if it was make it, take it, Mike would miss once and Durant would just keep scoring. How do you view Durant?
Yeah, Durant is one of the greatest offensive players in the history of the sport, like a true basketball genius in terms of putting the ball in the hole, right? Like that's the objective of the game. There are very few people in the history of the sport whose offensive arsenal you would take over him. I agree with him that too much of basketball discourse has become rings culture dominant. That we talk basketball basically three ways. We talk about rings and championships, transactions, trades, free agency, guys forcing their way out, the disgruntled superstar, and then the social media drama beef stuff. We're not doing a lot of like how a team defends the pick and roll, right? That's not like a lot of mainstream basketball conversation. So like that media criticism, I think, is a valid one, and he decries it. But there is also just some truth that not all rings are created equal. That guy didn't have any
So, yeah.
rings, and then he did a thing that is allowed that you could say that we bear some responsibility for because we said if you don't win a ring, you're Charles Barkley or you're Dan Marino, and we mock you for it. And then we moved the goalpost on him, and then we mocked him for what he did. But joining up with that Warriors team was weak. It was just it just flew in the face of competitiveness. It goes back to my Dodgers point from earlier. I understand why it happens. I get that it's a have and a have not world. It does not mean that I have to like it. Like Giannis's one in Milwaukee means a hell of a lot more than Durant's two in Golden State. Sorry, it just does. And so if Durant would have won in Oklahoma City, we would look at him so different. Even if he just had the one, we would look at him as Joker or Giannis, these guys that were singular entity forces of nature who didn't have the institutional advantage of the historic franchise and the warm weather market and the free agent destination and built the team the quote unquote right way. And his legacy would be beyond reproach. It'd be perfect if he would have won in Oklahoma City. But as soon as he went to Golden State and won these titles that felt cheap and that they flew in the face of competitive spirit, tanked his legacy. Okay, he would hate that phrase, but I can't really have a problem with it because it was a move that just flew in the face of competitiveness. It didn't feel
Okay, but
it
let me
didn't feel
throw this.
fair.
Let me be a devil's advocate. Does it feel fair? Let's say you're an Ohio sports fan and you're like, man, I that is so weak what Kevin Durant did. And I would be like, oh, Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith and all your great players, don't they go to where they'll have a competitive advantage over
No doubt.
Purdue? Like the NIL is not just the money grab for the best players. It's like, I want to go to a team that's already
No, no,
stacked.
no, no doubt. Um, and I don't have much of an argument against it, except in the history of the NBA, that's not what we celebrated. Like it turned the Heat into supervillains, and there was a historic pay jump when that in that CBA that at that offseason, one time every team in the league could afford a max player. And he just chose. So it's like you choose the 70-win team. Like it again, this is a reductive. It's just
It,
lame. It's just lame.
you know what? I always felt Kevin Durant, people preached to him loyalty, and he watched the Sonics move to Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
So in the back of his mind was, yeah, it's just this is all about the green. And then when Russell Westbrook would eat up the shot clock and get him the ball late, he and the organization actually Westbrook was, the better athlete. They weren't going to bail on Westbrook. And I think some of it I defend Kevin because I think he went, okay, I got drafted by Seattle. Now I'm playing in Oklahoma
No
City.
doubt.
And you have a point guard who can't get me the
No
ball
doubt.
until the end of the shot clock. And so if I'm gonna move, I'm not moving to a crappy team in a crappy city. I'm going to the Bay, Joe Lacob, and Steph Curry.
Yeah. Again, I get it. And the team was an unfair cheat code, and he won and he got his rings. But it would have meant more if he would have won in Brooklyn or Phoenix or Oklahoma City. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Man, I mean, right? Every title is not the same. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers' COVID title doesn't feel like the Celtics last year.
Yeah, but also like I just in terms of Giannis's Milwaukee title is a call it call it again immature. That is a pure title drafted by the team, 15th overall. Chris
Yeah.
Middleton is the running mate, and he has one of the three greatest Game 7, championship closeout performances ever in NBA history, where he drops 50 and he wins a title. That one thing is more sports pure than LeBron and the Heat. Doesn't mean LeBron and the Heat isn't a better team. Doesn't mean it wasn't more exciting. Doesn't mean it wasn't better business. Doesn't mean I would not want to go to South Beach and play with my friends. But like Giannis's title in Milwaukee is just, it's special. It just means a little bit more in history. Joker's in Denver. It just means a little bit more. I, I
That's
just, it
fair.
just, I think we all kind of know that. We just, we don't like to admit it. It doesn't feel fair, but
Well, that's why
we just know
I
it to be
think,
true.
yeah, I think if the Knicks won, being able to make a deal and really steal Jalen
Yeah,
Brunson and then make a deal, a risky deal to get Carl Anthony Towns, and then Mikal Bridges and give up a lot. I do think like the Knicks title would. I don't think they match up well with Boston at all. Boston offensively just attacks Carl Anthony Towns and
definitely.
Brunson. But I think one of the reasons that the Knicks are so likable is that, Carl Anthony Towns has had a lot of failures and Jalen Brunson's a Nova guy, a second rounder. I think there is value to, there are certain teams that are much easier to root for. And I don't think the Heatles or most Laker teams are terribly easy to root for.
LeBron's Cleveland title means more than his LA
Yes.
title or his Miami titles. We
Yes.
all
Clearly.
know that. We all just know that to be true. And there's a reason for it. Hometown kid, he was an underdog in the finals, led both teams in all five. I mean, that's the greatest NBA Finals performance ever. Like that is you could I would make the argument that that is the most impressive NBA title ever. The one that LeBron won in Cleveland over Golden State. Like
Funny
there is
thing
a
about
ranking.
funny thing the funny thing about that final is six of those games were blowouts, and then game seven was
Game 7
magical.
was magical.
it's like
Game 7 was magical.
it's like an average movie with a great 12 minutes to cap
No
it
doubt,
off.
but the accomplishment, like what the trophy
It was
represented, was
amazing.
like, holy shit. Like he went home, he won as an underdog, he beat the super team, he led in all five categories. The game 7, it
Oh, it's
was
great.
unbelievable. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen in sports.
Danny Parkins, breakfast ball. We fired through an hour 15. We gave you a little bit of everything. We kind of go all over the board, but
I
I
love it.
sometimes I just need this. It's
I love
therapeutic.
it. I love talking with you. I love picking your brain. Good stuff, man.
All right, buddy.